Hey Kim, how are you?
Good, Sam. How are you?
I'm good, just trying to make sure I know what I'm doing here today.
Yeah. So we're talking about the budgets?
Nope, just the ESG-CV regulations that came out, the changes that, that will affect your projects, stuff like that.
What? Did you send those?
Send the regulations?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
we just prepared this presentation and there'll
Okay.
be stuff going out afterwards.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll be right back.
Okay. Hey, Kels.
Hi
So
there.
can we real quick, if when I go to share my screen, I'm not sure how to do it where they just see the presentation.
So if you go to slideshow,
Okay.
from beginning,
Yep.
and then share your PowerPoint, it should be your screen. It will just see the slides, and you should see your notes on the other monitor.
Okay. So I just hit from beginning and then share.
Yeah, you can try. Why don't you try it out now?
When I hit from beginning, why? You're not seeing it, are you?
No. Are you doing share your screen in Zoom? So in Zoom at the bottom, click share your screen.
Yep.
And then click on the PowerPoint. Okay, it's coming up. Up. We're seeing okay, so now click from beginning.
That
Up
works?
on the left hand. Yep.
All right, perfect. So I know what I'm doing.
And now you can see your notes, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I would just leave it up.
Oh, as I close it out, sorry.
Yeah.
Do that again in a second. Practice makes perfect.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
We're going to give it a few more minutes and make sure we got everybody that wanted to join today.
You can't see me, can you?
No, I cannot.
All right. Let me figure that out.
You sound like me, Kim.
I'm like, let's see.
For attendance purposes, there's somebody who is labeled as Samsung SM. Is there somebody from a Samsung phone who we can take your attendance?
Yeah, Kelsey, it's Paul.
Oh, hi, Paul. Thank you very much.
So no problem. I don't know why I'm Samsung. I've been called far worse, I suppose.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, how you doing, Kim?
Good.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Wendy.
And at least 12 hours since I've seen you guys.
Yeah.
I miss you.
We also have a participant that called in with the line ending 5199.
It's Sylvia.
Sylvia. Perfect.
Mhm.
Welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you.
Okay. So for the sake of everybody's time, let's get started. I'm going to try showing this slideshow once again. Hopefully I'll do it correctly. And Kelsey, can you see it up on your end?
We're good.
Perfect. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining CARES for the presentation on HUD's ESG-CV regulations and ESG-CV vouchering. A couple housekeeping items as we get started. Please note we are recording this webinar and we'll post it to our website for reference and for those who are unable to attend today. We ask that you please hold your questions until the end. All right, let's get started. As many of you know, HUD released the ESG-CV regulations on September 1st. CARES has reviewed these regulations in depth and attended related webinars. From that, staff have teased out information that is relevant to all of you when operating ESG-CV funded projects. The purpose and goal of this presentation is to review opportunities and waivers in ESG-CV regulations that impact your projects and that impact planning for ESG-CV2 funds. And secondly, to provide a high-level overview of the vouchering process. During this presentation, we're going to start by defining ESG eligible activities as an overview or reminder. We will then provide an overview of the ESG-CV regulations, including requirements around spending down, additional eligible activities, and waivers and flexibilities. Third, we are going to review your projects and answer any questions on your projects based on these new regulations. And finally, we are going to provide a high-level overview of the vouchering process, including CARES' role in that process. So, as a refresher, on this slide, you will see the list of ESG eligible activities. The first is street outreach, which includes reaching out to unsheltered homeless individuals and families, connecting them with emergency shelter, housing, or critical services, and providing them with urgent non-facility-based care. The second is emergency shelter and includes renovation, essential services, and operations. Third is rapid rehousing, which eligible costs include rental assistance and housing relocation and stabilization services. Next, homeless prevention. Eligible costs include rental arrears and assistance and housing relocation and stabilization services. Just a reminder here that prevention costs can be used for ongoing rental assistance for at-risk homeless households. And finally, HMIS and administrative activities of the recipient. Moving on to ESG-CV, the CARES Act designates $4 billion for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. Funding was designated to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and mitigate the impact created by the coronavirus for households entering and currently utilizing the homeless service system. Now we are going to review the ESG-CV regulations. As previously mentioned, the regulations were released on September 1st of this year. Note that this document is within itself a waiver document. Overall regulations are still based on the original ESG regs. The notice is divided into 7 sections, which we'll summarize verbally today. In addition, CARES has drafted a summary document and will send it out after this presentation. In terms of program components, all regular ESG requirements apply, except the emergency shelter and outreach cap is waived. We anticipated this would be the case, but now it is codified. This is important to know when planning for ESG-CV 2 funds. Pre-award costs are eligible. This is important if you are an agency who was interested in utilizing funds, such as hazard pay, for costs you have already incurred. Specifically, the regulations state you are allowed to cover or reimburse costs after the date the community first began preventing, preparing for, and responding to coronavirus, provided they were spent to address coronavirus. An important tenet of the ESG-CV regulations is that funds must be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus among individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. In addition to the activities allowable under ESG guidelines, the following activities are newly allowable under the ESG-CV regulation. We're going to take a minute to describe each one, as you may be interested in utilizing funding within your projects for these activities. You also may want to think about if you would be interested in incorporating any of these activities into your ESG-CV 2 plans. All right, so first, temporary emergency shelters means any structure or portion of a structure which is used for a limited period of time because of a crisis such as natural disaster or public health emergency, to provide shelter for individuals and families displaced from their normal place of residence or sheltered or unsheltered locations. Eligible costs include leasing, acquisition of real property, renovation, operations, and services. Training may be used for training on infectious diseases, prevention and mitigation for staff working directly to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus among persons who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Hazard pay funds may be used to pay hazard pay for recipient or sub-recipient staff working directly to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus among persons who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Hand washing stations and portable bathrooms. Landlord incentives allowable as reasonable and necessary to obtain housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. For example, signing bonuses up to 2 months rent, security deposits of up to 3 months rent, paying to repair damages, and costs of extra cleaning. And last, volunteer incentives. Allowable to pay incentives to volunteers such as cash or gift cards who have been or are currently helping to provide necessary street outreach, emergency shelter, essential services, and housing relocation and stabilization services during the coronavirus outbreak. We're going to now discuss waivers, requirements, and flexibilities noted in the notice. This is important for your agency so you know parameters that affect your project's implementation, including participant eligibility. These parameters may also affect what you are interested in focusing on for ESG-CV 2 funding. First, in terms of emergency shelters, funding may be spent from the date the community began preventing, preparing for, and responding to coronavirus through January 31st, 2022. All other activities are eligible through September. CARES would expect the start date to be sometime in March 2020. In terms of rental assistance under these regulations, short and medium-term rental assistance is allowed and is defined as 3 to 12 months worth of assistance. This differs from the normal ESG regulations, which allow assistance up to 24 months. In addition, the fair market rent requirement for units is waived. Units may be approved if they meet rent reasonableness. If you have any questions about how to determine rent reasonableness, please reach out to us at CARES. We'd be happy to help you. Hotel motel costs are eligible solely under emergency shelter activity. Hotels and motels can be utilized for ongoing shelter and/or for quarantine or isolation of those in other housing programs. Additionally, funds can be used to pay for cleaning and repairing damages caused by program participants above the normal wear and tear of the room. There's also a waiver to the 24-month assistance over 3-year cap. Participants who reach the 24-month cap between January 21st, 20 and March 1st, 2021 are able to receive continued assistance for up to 6 months in order to maintain housing or prevent their homelessness. And finally, legal services are limited to those necessary to help program participants obtain, not lose housing. As an overall reminder, costs may be spent as necessary to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Okay. The regulations also go through program requirements. This again is important for your agency so you know HUD's expectations in implementing your projects. In terms of housing stability case management, HUD is waiving the requirement that housing stability case managers meet not less than once per month. This waiver is allowable through the period the recipient or subrecipient uses funds to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. HUD also requires recipients to establish procedures to prevent duplication of benefits provided through any and all federal funding streams. Finally, although HUD strongly encourages use of supportive services when necessary, individuals and families experiencing homelessness must not be required to receive treatment or perform any other prerequisite activities as a condition for receiving these services. We also want to make you aware of some of the policy priorities HUD emphasizes in the regulations. First, subrecipients may include funding those not currently or previously funded through ESG. Also, HUD encourages a focus on supporting participants in obtaining individual or independent living, sobriety, employment, self-sufficiency, and housing stability. Please note, however, again, that projects are prohibited from requiring treatment or other activities as a condition of receiving assistance. Projects must also prioritize households based on need, which will be achieved by working through the coordinated entry system. And finally, funds must be used to prevent the spread of coronavirus and to quickly connect persons to housing. The first element of the ESG-CV regulations that we want to share with you is the requirements around spending down, or what HUD calls expenditures. It is required that at least 20% of funds, including the first and second round allocations, must be spent by September 30th, 2021. It is also required that at least 80%.
I got it.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
that at least 80% of the funds, including first and second round allocations, must be spent by March 31st, 2022. And shelter funds must be spent by January 31st of 2022. This is important for your agency to know in order to plan accordingly for spend down. CARES will be supporting these efforts by creating a tracking process to ensure the community spends down by the deadlines. Ultimately, spending down by these deadlines is incredibly important for the community, as HUD has the ability to recapture funds if these deadlines are not met. We also want to note that if you are having trouble spending down or seeing needs in the community that differ from what we anticipated, you can request a move funds to other eligible activities if it is approved by the recipient. There are two types of reports that are required for ESG-CV funds. The CAPER, which is due 180 days from program year end, and quarterly reports due 10 days or 5 days for the state after the end of each calendar quarter. While the recipient and/or CARES will be conducting these reports, we will be reaching out to agencies for any necessary information, such as a list of projects or activities conducted with the ESG-CV funds. Please be aware this information will be necessary for HUD reporting and plan accordingly. Please also note, DV agencies will need to submit a CAPER and quarterly report as an agency. We are now going to answer some frequently asked questions about the ESG-CV regs. Please note, we will be providing a document with all these on our website that will be regularly updated. So first, how do I document that funds are being used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus? It is not required that you document that funds are being used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus on a client-by-client basis, but rather the recipient, the city or the county, will document this by providing documentation of when the community began preventing, preparing for, and responding to the coronavirus per activity in IDIS. 2, do the existing CARES Act waivers apply to ESG funds, ESG-CV funds? Yes, however, they are set to expire at the end of September, today. HUD is working on extensions of the waiver. If your agency needs a waiver in the meantime, please contact CARES, who will work with you to submit a request to HUD Buffalo. 3, am I allowed to utilize the waivers, flexibilities listed in the ESG-CV regulations for my normal ESG projects? It is allowable to apply ESG-CV regulations to ESG projects for funds used to prevent, prepare for, or respond to coronavirus, subject to many conditions. Please reach out to CARES if you are interested in utilizing ESG funds in this capacity. 4, am I allowed to utilize prevention funding during the eviction moratorium? It depends. If someone would be at risk of eviction but covered by the moratorium, then they are not at risk of homelessness and not eligible for ESG-CV prevention assistance. If someone is at risk of eviction, even though covered by the moratorium, for example, a landlord trying to evict even though there is a moratorium, you can provide legal assistance. Just be sure you are documenting the circumstances that make the client eligible and at risk of becoming homeless. If someone is not covered by the moratorium and still at risk of homelessness, examples, evicted for reasons other than non-rent, they're not on the lease, doubled up, moved more than twice in the last 60 days, or any other scenario that is in the at-risk of homelessness definition, they would be eligible for eviction prevention assistance. So now we will review what you all applied for under the ESG-CV funding as a reminder, and open it up for any questions about your projects or planning for ESG-CV2 funding, given these new regulations. The charts here show a breakdown of the eligible activities your community has applied for. So now let's open it up to any questions about the ESG-CV regulations as they apply to your project or planning for ESG-CV2. So, questions?
Samantha, this
Yeah.
is Linda Wright from the Salvation Army. I have a clarification question about the beginning of the ESG timeframe as far as eligibility for funding. I heard you say March. I didn't know whether you had to go back to March, or we could choose a date after March to begin to execute our funds or use our funds.
So you can choose a date after March. March is the latest you could go back to.
Sam, could you answer when the drop dead you've spent all the money requirement is? You said the 80% was a date. Is that, I mean, there must be 100% must be spent by blank date.
That is the end of September 2022, except for emergency shelters, which is January 31st of 2022.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Sure.
And on that incentive to landlords, I'm wondering if they've been a landlord in the past that you've utilized, is that kind of a disqualification? I don't know whether they've given more detail about that process.
Sam, do you want me to answer that
Yeah,
one?
please jump in.
Okay. There hasn't been any additional guidance. I think what HUD has said is that they understand that with the eviction moratorium, there are extremely low vacancy rates. And so while normally we would not be allowed to use these funds for landlord incentives, they think that it's pertinent so that we can try to, any available apartments, be able to utilize those in the community. So even if you've worked with the landlord in the past, there's nothing in the regulations that would prevent you from providing landlord incentives if that's required in order to get that person housed.
Other questions? Okay.
So this is Linda again. So I'm looking at your two screens with your project breakdown. So I'm confusing ESG-CV projects on your first screen to what the difference is with ESG-CV projects. Then you've got OTDA in there, and maybe I can't see the whole screen. Is that two different ESG-CV rounds of funding? Is that what you're telling us?
Correct. Yes. So the first chart you see is the city funding for ESG-CV, and then the second was the ESG-CV funding through the state OTDA.
And so today are we applicants for both? The people on this call are applicants are funded under both city and the county?
Correct. So you could have been in both or on one or the other. We invited all people funded to the.
And if we thought we had an application in for either one but didn't hear, can we assume that we only got the other one and not the other one? So we actually submitted, I think, when both, but only, I'm not sure we have heard officially. We didn't get both. So I guess maybe we just need to clarify that with CARES after the call, perhaps.
Yes.
that-
So
okay.
reach out to me, Linda, after, and we'll talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's move on. So next steps for planning. CARES will work internally between the grants and contracts and HMIS teams to set up your projects in HMIS. You will be notified when they are set. In terms of planning for ESG-CV2 projects, we recommend commencing in late October to see if the needs have changed at that point. In terms of written standard edits, CARES is working on draft language to be added to the written standards that will be shared with the community once ready. I'm now going to turn it over to Maureen. Are you on? I can't see.
Yeah,
So.
I'm here.
Okay, so I'm now turning it over for the ESG-CV vouchering.
Hi, everybody. I think that Sam emailed you all maybe last week to let you know that I had joined the team. And I've also already been in contact with many of you, so thank you. And I'm sure be in contact with you again many times. So as Sam mentioned, this is really just a very high level overview. We didn't want to get too into the weeds with the specifics. We will have more information for you in terms of the specifics of vouchering very soon. But I did want to hopefully clarify CARES' role in ESG-CV funding and talk a little bit about the difference between the OTDA stream and the city stream, and hopefully that will sort of clarify when and how you'll be reimbursed for these funds. So for CARES' role we are the administrator for the city, so City of Schenectady funds, we are acting as the administrator. And then for the OTDA funds, those are the county funds, we are considered the lead contractor. So as the administrator, the city is considered the grantee, and as the lead contractor in the county, we're sort of considered the grantee, and the agencies are our subrecipients. So that's sort of the best way to explain it. And in those capacities, we're responsible for a myriad of different things, and it's slightly different depending on which stream we're talking about. But in general, we're responsible for things like preparing contracts for signature, overseeing the vouchering process, which I'll talk more about, monitoring agencies, helping agencies to complete final reports, and then facilitating regular meetings with subrecipients. So again, we'll be in contact with you all to stay in touch about how funds are being spent down, to make sure that agencies are on track for that 20/80 split that HUD talked about, and just to make sure that the projects are meeting community needs. So, you know, we will hope to be reaching out to you all soon to get some of those meetings set up so that we have regular contact about how these funds are being spent. So hopefully this slide will sort of illuminate the difference between the two processes. They're not super different, but there are some subtle nuances in terms of timeline. So if your project is funded by OTDA funds, you will submit Excel vouchers, which I'll talk more about on the next slide, and all backups to CARES on a rolling basis. So anytime you're ready to voucher for an expense, you can submit those vouchers directly to us on a rolling basis. We will review the vouchers on a rolling basis. We will get back to you quickly. Our turnaround time is ideally 10 days to approve or deny those vouchers. And then we will upload all of the information that you've sent us and the approved vouchers into Grants Gateway. But the big difference with OTDA funded projects is that we only are able to do that on a quarterly basis. So those quarters are the 20th of December, March, June, and September. And then OTDA only draws down funds for those approved vouchers on a quarterly basis. So as the lead contractor, OTDA would remit payment to CARES, and then CARES would bank transfer voucher reimbursements directly to agencies' bank accounts. But again, that would happen on a quarterly basis, how you would see that flow of funds coming back to you. Can you go back, Sam?
Sorry.
That's okay. For city-funded projects, it's a little bit different. You'll submit Excel vouchers again. I'll talk a little bit more about those on the next slide and all of the backups, but you can do that at the end of each month. We will review those vouchers monthly. And again, our goal is to have an answer to you within 10 days. And of course, we'll let you know if anything's missing or if anything needs to be tweaked. You'll get a notification if your voucher's been approved or denied so that you can know sort of what to expect for next steps. Once we have approved vouchers, we will submit those to the city of Schenectady. The city will reimburse CARES, and then CARES again will bank transfer funds directly into your bank account. So we're sort of in a similar role in terms of how you're getting funding for both city and OTDA funded projects. Okay, you can go ahead, Sam. Ooh, is that click to add text there? So next steps for vouchering. So we will be sending pre-populated Excel voucher templates. So pre-populated is just that they will have the budget breakdowns that you provided to us already in the Excel voucher template. And this will be helpful for us to track down your spending. And it also is going into a brand new database that we've created that's going to help us pull reports really easily and make sure that spend down is on track. So this is why we wanted to sort of get more in depth with voucher training later on. Sam, can you go to the next bullet? So we are going to be inviting everybody to a training very soon. More information will be emailed to you all about dates and times, and that training will go through specifically how to fill out these new vouchers, what backups we'll need, and just the sort of the whole flow process so that it's very simple for you all, and on our end, our database is working correctly. And of course, all of those materials will be provided to you for your reference after the training. And in terms of OTDA, we just got information from them this week, so we should be reaching out to agencies ideally at the beginning of next week with more information about that and next steps to get those contracts rolling. So that's kind of the timeline, but the vouchering process in terms of those pre-populated Excel vouchers are kind of on the same timeline for both city and OTDA funded projects. And then finally, if you have any questions before we chat again, feel free to reach out to myself or Kirsten. My email's up there. I'm sure you all have probably communicated with Kirsten in the past. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions before we have another chance to meet.
Okay, so that is the end of our presentation. Are there questions on the vouchering portion for Kirsten or Maureen?
So the city money could come on a monthly basis. OTDA money, we're waiting for a quarter plus the processing time that it takes to make it happen at the end of the quarter.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. It's not specific to vouchering. I don't think I've heard or seen how, this ESG-CV allocation is, whether there is any information about how this is going to impact sort of the typical ESG process from HUD to counties to cities to, I guess, to the state even, right? As far as that timeline, with this being an additional one, are people expecting ESG flow of funds to keep pace with what their traditional flow of funds have been for very much the same services, but generally to support the community, to serve the homeless? I'm just curious if CARES knew or had any information around that.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. You're asking about the regular ESG funds vouchering versus the ESG-CV funding vouchering?
Yeah, I guess I'm more concerned, yes, it's not just vouchering, it's just sort of, is the allocation process with the typical ESG calendar, ESG flow of funds to communities going to be impacted at all because of COVID's extra allocations? When they were first released, it was sort of hard to know whether they all rolled in together. This happened with the emergency food and shelter some too, right? They all got sort of rolled in together. So I was just curious to whether there's been any communication from HUD to the field about the traditional ESG allocation process, timelines, things like that.
Sure. So I think I see Sylvia and Dan Gray from the city on the call. And if Sylvia or Dan, if you would like to speak to the traditional process, I will let you take the floor.
Oh, Dan stepped away. Now, what was that question again?
Is the traditional ESG process being impacted at all by the ESG-CV funds?
Oh, no, not at all. No, it's business as usual. It has not been impacted at all for regular ESG.
So Sylvia, have you, as a follow-up to that question, have you heard from HUD that you're like going to be getting normal ESG funds on a similar time frame as usual?
Yes, we are. Yes, we will. We have them out. I believe we already have them. We just haven't got it dispersed in the contracts out yet for it, or the letters. We're just now in the process of getting that all out to everyone. For regular, that would be for the 2021 project year.
Thank you.
And we also have been awarded ESG2. I think you may already be aware of that. So.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending today. And of course, you can always reach out to CARES if you think of something after the fact, and we'll all be in touch. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.